Hey everyone, welcome to Plants and Politics. So, huge news broke yesterday, potentially huge news. Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who also presided over the cases against Trump allies Paul Manafort and Roger Stone, she issued a scathing ruling yesterday in regard to this issue, which involves the former Attorney General Bill Barr and information that the Justice Department is attempting to keep hidden from the public. This all began with FOIA requests, which for people out of the country, out of the United States, these are freedom of information requests that can be made for public documents, for government documents, and anyone is entitled to them. But the government can fight it. So a government watchdog group called Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics made this request for documents involving Bill Barr and the decision he made in not prosecuting, not bringing charges against Trump when Robert Mueller issued his report. CREW, which stands for Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, requested a number of documents related to that Mueller investigation, and more specifically, Barr's decision-making process, how he came to the decision and whose decision was it who ultimately made the decision not to prosecute Trump. Well, they received some documents, but the Department of Justice was holding out on a couple of things which CREW believed to be of utmost importance. Judge Jackson ultimately decided that CREW was correct. As part of her ruling, she flat out accused Attorney General Bill Barr, former Attorney General, of lying to Congress, lying to the public and the court about how he made that grotesque decision to let Trump off the hook for obstruction of justice. Because remember, the Mueller report contained 10 instances. He cited 10 different instances in which Trump allegedly obstructed justice. And ultimately, Mueller wasn't able to really come to a conclusion about whether or not Trump and his campaign had colluded with Russia or another foreign government because they refused to hand over information that Mueller requested. In addition, they used encrypted messaging apps, so he couldn't see a lot of the messages that were sent back and forth between the Trump campaign members and people in other countries, even Jared Kushner, Ivanka's husband, and so forth, because these messaging apps allow you to set them up so that the messages vanish after the recipient has read it. So it's gone. Why you would use a technology like that unless you're trying to hide something, I don't know. Doesn't really sound legitimate. And most importantly, Donald Trump refused to be interviewed for this investigation. Donald Trump just refused, and Mueller just let it go. They allowed him to answer written questions, which you know how that went. He didn't answer them. His attorneys answered them. So not exactly the actions of an innocent person. But the question that remained was, did the Office of Legal Counsel actually advise Barr about whether or not to prosecute Trump, which is what he alleges, or was this a predetermined decision because he was covering for Trump? So Judge Jackson seems to know the answer because she was allowed access to a pertinent document, one of the documents that CREW is trying to get a hold of. And the Justice Department even objected to her reading of this memo, which is in question. The judge asserted that the die had already been cast and that it didn't matter what information was contained in the Mueller report because Barr had already decided not to prosecute Trump before he had an opportunity to read a single page of this damning report. So she wrote in her ruling, quote, "The fact that he would not be prosecuted was a given." And then regarding the document that Barr and the DOJ attempted to keep hidden, the one which she read, Jackson noted, quote, excised portions belie the notion that it fell to the Attorney General to make a prosecution decision or that any such decision was on the table at any time. So Bill Barr is asserting, he's saying, Mueller left this up to me. He left this decision up to me, and then based on input from the Office of Legal Counsel and other sources, I determined that we shouldn't prosecute him. There was no reason to prosecute Trump. No laws had been broken. And she's saying, no, actually, that was already predetermined. It literally didn't matter what Mueller wrote or how many laws had been broken. You had already decided, and everybody was on board to say, nope, he didn't do anything wrong. Let's just move on. Judge Jackson also called out Barr for his obfuscation of the facts and how his public summary and that statement that he gave about the report had been written in advance of receiving Mueller's findings. I mean, we kind of assumed, but to hear a judge say it after she's had access to these documents is pretty stunning. She wrote, quote, "The Attorney General's characterization of what he'd hardly had time to skim, much less study closely, prompted an immediate reaction as politicians and pundits took to their microphones and Twitter feeds to decry what they feared was an attempt to hide the ball." She's given the DOJ until May 17th to appeal her ruling or just release the documents to crew. So here's the deal. Yes, this is shocking to hear from a judge and that she's actually seen these documents, and she concurs with what we all basically already knew, was that Bill Barr is a piece of shit. He is a partisan actor. He was never the Attorney General for the people. He was Trump's Attorney General. He was there only to run interference for him. He played games when it came to Roger Stone's legal matters. He interfered when it came to Mike Flynn's legal matters. He probably played a part in Manafort's issues, and we know that he ran interference. He tried to use the Justice Department, which we all pay for, by the way, with our tax dollars. He used our tax dollars to fight the release of not only Melania's friend's book, Melania and Me, but also the book that Michael Cohen was publishing about the Trump family and Donald Trump. So we know he's just a bottom feeder. But I am fucking furious at so many people, and even people on the left. I am absolutely pissed off at so many people. Bill Barr, of course, but I am pissed as hell at Pelosi, at Nancy Pelosi, for failing to do her job and impeach Trump after this Mueller report was released. The right seized on her failure to do her job and impeach him at that time. And they used it as a perfect talking point about Trump's so-called innocence. They used it to validate their belief that he was innocent and that this was all a witch hunt. The MAGA crowd and the right-wing propaganda channels all claimed if he had done anything wrong, Democrats would impeach him. She gave them a perfect talking point. I get the argument that, Republicans had control of the Senate and they had control of the White House. And so even if they had impeached him in the House, it would have died in the Senate. Mitch McConnell would have never taken it up, or even if he did, they would have voted to allow him to remain in office, just as they did with his other two impeachments. I get that, but it would have served as a way to widely disseminate the facts about what was in the Mueller report and the Russia probe and everything else that Trump had done illegally. It would have taken away so many of their talking points, because how many people on the right do you think sat and read the entire Mueller report? And how many of them got the truth from right-wing media about what was in the Mueller report? And then for everyone on the left, It would have proven to us that our votes matter, especially for so many progressives like myself who already felt slighted by the way the election in 2016 was handled with Bernie. It felt like another slap in the face. It felt like for all of us who swallowed our feelings about that, who helped Democrats take back control, we felt like, why? Why did we even bother to give them power? We handed them the House in 2018, in large part so they would impeach Trump. They had a huge mandate. They had more than any other march in history, more women out in the street for the Women's March after Trump was inaugurated. If they weren't going to use that power, then so many of us felt like, why should we bother? Why do we bother to go out and vote? Why does it matter if they're not going to hold Trump accountable for violating the Constitution, for grifting off the government, for using his position to fill his bank account, and all of the other crimes he committed, all of the other nefarious, illegal, immoral, reprehensible things that he was doing? By her refusal to impeach him when the Mueller report came out, Pelosi allowed Bill Barr's lies about what was contained in that report to stand. And then when she finally did impeach him with only 1 year left in his first term, she made impeachment about Ukraine. One single issue. Again, ignoring everything else that he had done because she didn't think that the American people could handle all of the details. So she made it about one issue that most US citizens don't give a damn about because they don't understand how not helping Ukraine, not giving them weapons and helping them in their fight against Russia, they don't understand or know how it affects them. And it definitely doesn't affect them on a day-to-day basis as far as economics go and whether or not they have a job, whether or not they have health insurance. First rule of marketing, what's in it for me? You have to tell people what's in it for them to make them care. She failed. And of course, I am absolutely beyond pissed off at Robert Mueller for not growing a pair of ovaries and making the decision himself. He should have made that call. But these old-time Republicans don't get it. They still think that this is their party. This is the party they knew from years ago. And they falsely believed that Trump was your typical lying, cheating politician, no different than anybody else, any other politician that's ever made it into the White House. They all have their shit. They all have their skeletons. You know, what's the worst that can happen? Well, I guess now we know, don't we? Their failure to see him for what he is led us to where we are now. He is a sociopath with autocratic aspirations. And he's literally willing to allow people to die to get what he wants. He proved that on January 6th. He didn't care if his supporters died that day. He didn't care if police died that day. And the fact that all of these people, left, right, and center, treated him as just a normal Republican president and a typical politician is disgraceful. It is a massive failure. Pelosi allowed him to hold State of the Union addresses. When they held hearings or the impeachment, they allowed Trump's sycophants and his appointees to just ignore subpoenas. They just ignored them. Oh, they took him to court, which dragged out. You know what Republicans did when someone refused to show up and testify before Congress about Bill Clinton? They had her arrested. They threw her in jail. Susan McDougal sat in jail for 22 months because she didn't want to testify against Bill Clinton in the Whitewater investigation back in the 90s. So say what you will about Republicans, but they know how to wield power and they know how to get results. And there's a direct line from Pelosi's failures and Mueller's failures and everyone else who had power and refused to use it. There's a direct line from all of them and their failures and weakness to that domestic terrorist attack on January 6th. 7 people died on and following that day as a result of that terrorist attack. Those people would likely be alive and here today if someone, anyone, would have taken the threat of Donald Trump seriously and stepped up and just done their goddamn job. Yes, Republican lawmakers are culpable. They're the first in line as far as blame goes. But we can't allow others off the hook just because they have a D behind their name or just because they tried hard. Well, they did what they could. They wrote a harsh report. They ripped up Trump's speech. They did a side clap. They had the power. They had an audience. They had the future in their hands, and they failed us. And it's time that we all start asking them and ourselves why. Why did they choose to do nothing when they had the ability to impeach him and to hold him accountable for everything he had done? Why did they let it go? Why did they give him a pass? All right, guys, if I hear any more, I'll let you know. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Take care, and I will talk with you soon.
Yeah.